It is worth saying about Wolf Creek, though, John, isn't it? That, I mean, Mark loves his horror, and he found it, quite full on. And I think your director has been quoted as saying, in general, you lose 2% of the audience every time it's shown because it's strong stuff.
Yes, 10 to 20 women usually walk out. I think a few men would like to, but they don't want to be seen to be walking out. It's not very masculine, I suppose. But I figure if you're freaked out of your mind, there's no good staying there.
Is it very Australian? Because the director said one of the big things for him is this is a full-on Australian horror movie.
It is very Australian.
Does that just mean that you haven't paid for some C-list American actor to come in and boost the ratings?
That's usually that's another horror film we have to put up with in my country a lot. No, it's a friend of mine described my character as the anti-Dundee, which I think sums it up pretty well. It is very Australian. It's set in the outback, and he's an outback shooter.
It's very much a film to do with the landscape, and the funny, the thing is that because so much of the drama is drawn out of the drama of the landscape. Like I said, it starts around this crater, which is a meteor crater, which I presume is an actual natural meteor.
It is, and there's 5 characters in the film. There's the 3 young ones. There's me, and there's the outback.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really is an important thing, and actually, as you mentioned before, the time that the film takes in introducing you to all those characters, it's also to do with drawing you into that landscape, because it's like outer space. I mean, particularly if for an audience in the UK, the area is you might as well have landed on another planet.
So is it an Australian The Hills Have Eyes?
Well, yeah, funnily enough, The Hills Have Eyes, which I think is a great and often underrated movie, I think The Hills Have Eyes is a very good comparison, because again, The Hills Have Eyes is to do with the kind of the town and country divide. It's to do with civilization meeting, uncivilized life. And in fact, what happens...
It's about being eaten by hillbillies.
No. The key thing in The Hills Have Eyes is that, of course, it's the cannibals in the hills who are more civilized than the townies that go out and invade the hills. Actually, in the case of this movie, it is a very different kettle of fish. It's about going out into the unknown and meeting something that you think is familiar. And of course, the film has this kind of peculiar relationship with factual cases that people have read about. Although it says based on true events, obviously it's inspired by cases that people would have heard of before, but it's not literally a true story, in the same way that, for example, Texas Chainsaw Massacre says at the beginning these events are true, although of course they didn't happen in Texas and there wasn't a chainsaw involved, but apart from that they're true. But apart from that, yes, so it draws on a kind of folkloric knowledge of there is something out there that is very, very bad and dangerous. And I think what it does is it throws the audience into this unknown territory and asks them, like the film's actual heroes, I suppose, to fend for themselves. One thing I would like to say in this issue of people walking out, people often say that watching horror movies is a sadistic experience. It's not. Good horror movies are primarily masochistic. They are to do with the audience putting themselves through pain, and the audience suffering, and the audience actually feeling the anguish, and that's why people walk out.
Why would you want to do that?
Because actually, like any other transcendent experience, masochism can be a fantastically invigorating and uplifting thing. And the reason that some people walk out is in a way, is exactly proof of that. And I would give you a comparison here between...
What are you talking about? Masochism, is it?
Yes, it is. It's putting yourself in harm's way, and it is literally sitting through, and it is experiencing...
suffering pain.
Yeah, but look... People go
out of choice.
Yeah, hang on. People go and see King Lear, right? King Lear is all about suffering, and people have. It is. That's what it is. Great drama.
3.5 hours.
Is great. Yes, exactly. And it has people having their eyes gouged out, and people saying "out vile jelly" and that sort of thing, to such an extent that, as you probably know, G. Wilson Knight famously stood up and shouted "obscene" during one famous performance of King Lear. Horror cinema is about putting yourself through the mince and not putting somebody else through it. And I think it's very important that what happens in the build-up to Wolf Creek is that your sympathy, your empathy is with the victims. And actually what makes the second half of it so tough is that you are suffering with them. And I think what I'm trying to say is people walking out of the film doesn't mean they walk out because it's sadistic. Actually, they walk out because it's simply too much, because it is really tough. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I think that's true. What people read about the serial killers and read the detail to think, oh, if that happened to me, how terrible would that be? Or they go and see Jaws because you often think, what would it be like to be eaten alive from the legs up, And it's random, all this stuff. It could happen to anybody, and I think that's what draws people to go and have a look and find out what it's all about.
Is one of the reasons why people might find it tough and tougher than
Which
some
it
horror
is.
movies is that you were mentioning whether Texas Chainsaw Massacre was an inspiration on the director. He's talked about Mike Leigh being quite an influence on him, and I wondered if, in the same way that Mike Leigh will linger on a particular, if there's been an argument or an awkward moment in a family conversation, he'll stay with it, and everyone's saying, "Oh, this is a bit awkward,
Yes.
and it's a bit embarrassing." Is he doing the same? Is that one of the reasons why this is so tough? Is that when something horrific has happened, the camera kind of hangs around a bit?
No, I don't think it's Mike Leigh. I think it's more Greg McLean has made a what feels like a documentary, but it's actually extremely well shot and extremely well acted, and and everyone knows their lines, but it feels like a documentary. And he's shot things like a newsreel photographer would shoot it. It's like someone getting shot. It's a wide shot, whereas normally in cinema you'd come in and you close up on the barrel, close up on a scared person, close up, bang, blood, close up. He'll do all that in a wide shot. So it's more that he's tried to make it feel real, and I think that's why it's so
Do you think
horrifying.
there'll be some people turning up at the cinema somewhere tonight thinking, Pride and Prejudice, Wolf Creek? What do you think? And and they can't decide.
Well, I for me, it's a no-brainer. It's like you know which of the two films is the real.
Maybe you could
outstanding.
split up for the evening, and then compare notes afterwards.
Can I just say on the subject of the Mike Leigh thing, actually I think the comparison is valid in as much as I think there is a comparison between Mike Leigh and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I think that what Tobe Hooper was doing with that film, which I think is an influence on Wolf Creek, is exactly what you're talking about, that it's not cut in a nice conventional way that makes you feel this is safe, this is dramatised, this is packaged. The lingering, it's not to do with lingering on on violence, it's to do with the fact that the film doesn't conventionally move in the way that a film should, so you feel completely ill at ease. I mean, that's the last 40 minutes of Wolf Creek, you just don't know how far it's going to go. And John Carpenter once famously said that what horror does is it takes you up to a certain point and it threatens to go beyond a line at which you'll lose the... And really genius horror travels along the knife edge of acceptability. And it's how long can you hold the audience there before you lose them. And certainly in the screening that I was in, it held everyone. And they were holding their breath and they were ducking and cowering and, and coming out and stumbling out into the light.
Ed in Clapham, is Wolf Creek scarier than Razorback, which is a fine Aussie horror film? John?
Razorback was one of the best comedies I've ever seen.
Okay.
Well, Killer Pigs, it's
Terrifying.
I thought it was very funny.
but Razorback's it's Russell Mulcahy, isn't it?
Tony on this says, thanks for entertaining me on a Friday night in Beijing after a long week's work. I've always been intrigued, this is for you, John, always been intrigued about the main characters in significant horror movies, and if the darkness portrayed somehow stays and affects the personality of the actor.
Well, there's a lot of darkness in me trying to play the character, and I had, for the first time in my life, I had to stay in character, all from the makeup chair to when they said rap, because I couldn't become John Jarratt and then go back to being that dark character very easily, so I had to stay there. But when the film itself wrapped, no, I just shook him off, had a haircut, had a shave, had a wash, and walked away.
Well, I wish you all the best, John. Thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And well, it'd be interesting to know, actually, we ought to have this conversation this time next week,
Okay.
whether if you go and see Wolf Creek, based on what you've heard, count if you could do a count, how many people do walk out, because your director said it's about 2%, so
Sure.
it's a few people in each screening. It'd be interesting to pick that story up this time next week. John, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you a question?
Well,
Have
it all
you
depends.
have you seen The Hills Have Eyes?
Yes.
I'm just astonished. I was just completely thrown that you'd seen The Hills Have Eyes.
A long time ago in another part of me where I just enjoyed those kind of films, but as I've grown older, I just can't stomach it.
Wow. But I'm amazed. I mean, because it's
But I almost walked out of that.
Okay.
I found that tough.
But it is tough. But it's a brilliant and very, very intelligent, piece of modern horror. But I'm just amazed.
Was
because,
it 82 or something?
Yeah, early 80s. Because Hills Have Eyes 2 is terrible. That is absolute garbage.
I never made it that far.
No.
I
But-
changed by then.
Okay.